When I was working on the Silent Hill 2 video, I came to learn a little something about myself. Within that ever-orbiting Venusian carousel of games vying for the top spot of my heart, I connect with each of them in a respectively unique but still very singular way. Each one of them has a specific thing that strikes a deep, resonant chord within me. While reminiscing on these 4 experiences, my memories aren't just of the combat or the puzzles or even the story themselves per se. Rather, I relive the moments when holding the controller unearths for me a shard that, when dug up, can be placed into a fragment that forms the mirror through which I view myself. As far as what said thing is for each title, well, I spent the entire last video talking about Silent Hill 2, so hopefully that was elucidated properly there. But I also got the opportunity to shout out Bioshock for brilliantly deconstructing the illusion of choice and wrenching at the strings which puppeteer us, both in games and in life. And I also got to talk a little bit about Spec Ops: The Line, a game that cuts to the marrow with its savage meta-commentary on military violence, which forced me to confront how I'd consumed narratives of xenophobic atrocity so long as they were wrapped in the veneer of heroism. There was, however, one game I didn't get the opportunity to show the love that it deserved, that being the Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time's thing is capturing the inexorable, bittersweet passage of growing up. Of course, Ocarina's world is littered with analogies to the passage of time. From the titular musical instrument to the 7-year time skip, the theme of days gone by is woven into the tapestry of this iteration of Hyrule. Yet, Link's 1998 high fantasy adventure is more than just a tale of growth by way of triumph over adversity. It's a journey where the things we fear grow and evolve with us as well. As if every step towards adulthood casts our shadows longer and darker. Bizarrely, the N64 Zelda game paints a more comprehensive portrait of dread than the other 3 games on the list that are in, or at least more adjacent to, the horror genre. And nowhere is this more evident than in the bosses that we and Link must face. As young Link, we fight against very primal frights, physical embodiments of tactile dangers, visceral creatures that are likely to frighten little kids. If you take a step back and look at the 3 bosses that Link has to face as a child, they are, in essence, a big spider, a big lizard, and a big germ. Very tangible monsters, as the kind that we would imagine lurking in our young closets or under our beds. The first pest we must exterminate is the verminous Queen Goma, an enormous armored spider that stalks Link with one divisive glowing eyeball. The Goma encounter plays on the extremely common phobia of arachnids, or if not that, at least the almost universal discomfort with creepy crawlies, especially if they're the size of a sedan. Next is King Dodongo, a colossal fire-breathing lizard, though notably, he's just shy of being an actual dragon, more akin to some kind of monitor species, one that might be gawked at from a textbook page or a zoo trip, only now zhuzhed up with the unfettered imagination for a bout of self-inflicted herpetophobia. Our last grotesquerie that we must overcome before Link pulls the Master Sword from the stone and gets booted 7 years into the future is Baronade, a pulsating, electrified cluster of inflammation and invasive organisms, like an infection glimpsed through scrunched eyes and laced fingers, a palpable manifestation of the juvenile ick felt towards all things gross. And then there's Navi.
Hey, listen! Hey, listen! Hey, listen! Hey, listen! Listen! Listen!
These 3 introductory skirmishes also demonstrate a subtextual immaturity in the understanding of fear as play. Not only is this trio external and animalistic, they are also demonstrably conquerable, vanquished by an arsenal of toys, a slingshot, a boomerang, and... Alright, who let the 10-year-old have high explosives? As we step onto the precipice of being considered a legal adult, the things that scare us have shifted, now taking root deep in the recesses of our minds. Those extrinsic material threats are gone. They have shed their corporeal husks and awoken as soul-rending existential nightmares, only bequeathed upon us as a blessing of growing up. The last major event Link endures in his adolescence is failure. Link is powerless to stop Ganondorf from pursuing Zelda, which ultimately leads to the downfall of Hyrule, an embarrassment that haunts him. As such, it's no coincidence that the first boss Link encounters as an adult is Phantom Ganon, an apparition of the unresolved past. Phantom Ganon isn't just another beastie for Link to hunt down, it is the avatar of his inadequacy. As Link, we must contend not only with the barrage of magical attacks, but also the lingering specter of humiliation. This mirrors that most agonizing and demanding aspect of our human ripening: self-awareness. After the trials of the Forest Temple, Link returns to Death Mountain, where he had faced King Dodongo at the base of the mountain as a child. He now proceeds into the volcanic crater to stand off against Volvagia, an actual mythical dragon, and one with a tyrannical legacy. In the ancient times of Hyrule, Volvagia terrorized the Gorons, a race indigenous to Death Mountain, who are also slightly coated with Native American imagery, such as their tribalistic tattoos and darker skin compared to the other races of Hyrule. Eventually, Volvagia was slain, but now in this darker future timeline, Ganondorf has resurrected the beast and reinstated its despotic reign. The Legend of Volvagia stokes memories in my mind of growing up and learning of the atrocities that my country had committed against the indigenous people of this land, and the very founded fears not only of the bigoted, violent past, but that our history of racism may return. There's also a subtler lesson here with Volvagia that not all fears are intrinsically bad. Some of them can be quite rational. The important thing is not that we are afraid, but what we do in the face of fear. Do we submit to cowardice and allow these flames of fury to engulf and burn our world to ash? Or do we stand up against and extinguish their terror? Out of the fires of Death Mountain and under the frying pan of Lake Hylia lies the cancerous amoeboid Morpha. As our second water-themed boss, Morpha draws immediate parallels to Baronade, yet where Baronade typifies the reflexive childhood repulsion of touching something yucky, Morpha has mutated into something more malignant, an amorphous, invasive affliction whose watery tendrils don't just hit, but phase through Link's body, desecrating spaces where it does not belong. In short, Baronade is to getting sick as Morpha is to becoming diseased. A hallmark of getting older is the crippling anxiety to fall afoul of some unseeable force that drags you under completely.
I don't feel too bad about it, Link. At least you don't have to deal with the American healthcare system.
Unsurprisingly, nowhere in Ocarina of Time is the motif of psychological dread more vividly realized than in the Shadow Temple. At the end of this morbid labyrinth, one would expect a correspondingly macabre finale. Yeah, like that. A deadly contest against a Grim Reaper proxy of some kind. Then, this thing shows up. This doofy-looking, disassembled, blind idiot guy, who's actually easier to beat if you just don't use the hover boots that you got from his temple, is named Bongo Bongo. And I love him. I am 100% serious. Bongo Bongo is far and away my favorite Zelda boss. and in fact was what caused me to start looking at the symbology of Zelda bosses in the first place. I will admit, my rationale for loving Bongo Bongo is due to an intensely personal reading of this penultimate dungeon master. The arduous trek through the Shadow Temple, adorned with iconography of gruesome death, juxtaposed with BB's relentless drumming in the dark, conjures to my mind the fatalistic myth of the tortured artist. As something of a failed artist myself, I can tell you that when I was introduced to this idea, I latched onto the possibility that the only reason my art had thus far been unsuccessful was because my life hadn't hurt enough. And so I sought suffering. But in truth, the only thing that this self-inflicted darkness brought me was darkness. Further exploring the ethereal themes of the Shadow Temple, our last gauntlet before the endgame is Kotake and Komu of the Spirit Temple. These two bickering sister sorceresses harness the elements of fire and ice respectively. Now, if this was the entire boss fight, the twins would actually perforate my hypothesis something fierce, as squabbling siblings are typically associated with the petulantly childlike. Luckily, at about the 2/3 point in the fight, Kotake and Komu DBZ fuse together into Twin Rova, enabling them to wield both flavors of magic simultaneously. Like Bongo Bongo, Twin Rova's transformation spurs me to introspect. When I look back at the roughest roads that I've traveled in my life, I see that the only one ever laying caltrops in my path was me. And even when I finally came to recognize this, it ripped me in half, causing a war between these two irreconcilable sides of my spirit, like oil and water, bleach and vinegar, like fire and ice. In the past, when I've subjected friends and family to my ramblings about Ocarina of Time, I usually end it there. I still think that illuminating the dungeon bosses in this more symbolic light is the most effective method I have for imparting my emotional recollection. But this is all supporting evidence that I only gathered on subsequent playthroughs. Even as a third grader, finishing Ocarina left me with tugged heartstrings that exceeded my ability to articulate at the time. After the climactic showdown with Ganondorf, we banish the villain, save the princess, and restore order to the land. At the end of our grueling journey, after all of these struggles, facing our fears and failures after we are victorious, there's no grand parade for us, no ovation, no cake. Zelda smiles, but there's a quiet sorrow in her expression. Link hands the ocarina back to her, and she sends us to the past for one last time. She claims that this is for us, so that we can live out a normal childhood, but something still feels off. Link subsequently returns to his pre-skip timeline, burdened by his memories, cursed with adult knowledge, thrust upon him by the inevitable weight of time. Oh, and then just to make sure that the game has ripped your heart out, dunked it into a vat of salt, and then sutured it back up into place, Navi just up and bails! I do understand why everyone rags on Navi for being annoying, but I don't know, man. She was this constant presence that guided us through our journey of maturation, however naggingly. They even made her nullification by Ganondorf and triumphant return against Ganon an emotional throughline in the finale. Maybe I'm sitting at my lonely little table of one here. And yeah, I also thought that Navi could be grating at times, but losing her still stung. She wasn't felled in combat, fighting the good fight against true evil. She didn't make a heroic sacrifice. She just left, did her job, and then flew away. That simple, silent exit hit me harder than anything else in the game. Plus, she enabled Z-targeting, so 10 out of 10. Look, I'm just saying, there's a reason why the whole next game is instigated by Link trying to track Navi down. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was the first video game that made me think and feel more deeply about video games, that there might be something past that surface level of play. On my first save file, it really was anything more than just a vague, disquieting lack of closure. As I progressed in years, the themes of Ocarina have only become clearer and more prescient. The more I sensed the albatrosses of aging nested inside Ocarina's gallery of rogues. And now, as Venus shifts once again into retrograde, and I have spilled ink and tears in explaining why this interactive experience is intertwined with the very essence of my being, I feel more confident than ever in declaring The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time as the best game I have ever played. Hang on, you're telling me I didn't have to shoot the crowd in Spec Ops?